Hey guys, this is James with thegraymattersblog.com coming to you on another one of my walks through the beautiful South Texas woods. Today I'm going to try something a little bit different. We're actually going to read one of my longer short stories. We're going to read the very first installment of the Witcher Man series. It's The Witcher Man and the Case of the Wolf That Wasn't. This is my really big foray into urban fantasy. It's kind of where because I love urban fantasy, I love reading Iron Druid and the Dresden Files and all that. But I always had these complaints about about the book series, the plots, the characters. I always thought Dresden was kind of like unnecessarily whiny for a badass wizard. So I kind of took everything I didn't like about those, all the representations I didn't really care for, and I kind of decided, you know what, hey, if you want it done right, do it yourself. So I decided to write this. I'm going to read the first installment. It's going to take us actually a couple of videos to get through this, so this is going to be part one, and at the end I'll tell you a little bit more about it. I was not on fire. Considering my day so far, that's about all I had going for me. I propped my feet up on the desk, reflecting on the list of annoyances, problems, and general pains in the ass the day had brought me. This caused epic levels of annoyance in the werewolf sitting across from me. I consider that last bit a bonus since the werewolf in question was the largest pain in the ass so far. It wasn't just his personality, although it was my considered opinion that he did not have one. It was more that I had a long-standing aversion to dealing with werewolves at all. This owed less to the rather inconvenient maulings I had been involved in on 2 separate occasions, and more to the fact that I considered the vast majority of them to be either insufferable bullies that needed to be taught some manners, or mewling prats who liked to be bullied. Either of these are really not what I consider my sort of people. My interactions with them usually ended up with somebody getting mauled, although only on one of the aforementioned 2 occasions had that somebody been me. "Are you listening to me, Witcher Man?" the werewolf growled. I noted that he actually did growl, which if you ask me was totally uncalled for. "If I say no, is there even the slightest chance you'll stop talking?" I asked wistfully. I thought he might go into an apoplexy at any moment, or at least start foaming at the mouth. His name was Damien, which I would bet the testicle of your choice was not the name he had been born with, unless his parents were incredibly active in 60s drug culture. And he was the beta wolf for the local pack. This meant he was technically the second in command, but in reality he mostly served as an enforcer and errand boy for the pack's alpha. It also meant that he was totally unused to the kind of lip he was getting from my charming self. Damien lunged to his feet, slamming both hands down on my desk and baring his teeth. This caused the tarantula in the terrarium on my desk to hide under its rock in fear. "You listen to me, Witcher Man. My alpha sent me here to hire you, so that's what I'm going to do. But don't think for 1 minute that I'm going to put up with this kind of crap from anyone, let alone a meatbag like you." My response to this was to yawn hugely while still reclining precariously in my office chair. I also extended my middle finger in the universal sign for live long and prosper. Or maybe it means go bugger a goat. I always get those 2 mixed up. It's not that Damien's display of toxic masculinity wasn't impressive. Even in his completely human form, his teeth almost seemed a bit, toothier than you would expect from a true Homo sapien. The faint gold tint in his eyes was also a nice touch, although he probably was counting on the whole stronger than a roided out Austrian thing to put the fear of the wolf into me. Yeah, that wasn't going to work. I had been mauled by scarier things than him. Judging by the vein on his forehead preparing to go full Vesuvius and the characteristic prelude to an ass-whooping eye bulge he was performing, I decided I better head this off before he did something we'd both regret. I dropped my feet to the floor and leaned forward. "Look, Damien, you can the lupine machismo. We both know Wolfgang has declared me off limits. You're big, bad, and have especially large genitals. Good for you. Unless you're ready to throw down with your alpha over breaking his edict, why don't we just cut the crap and you tell me what he needs my help with?" Yes, their alpha's name really is Wolfgang. He's German, so it might even be legit. Although I wouldn't bet a testicle on it. He also really had given me definitely not a chew toy status, although that was about half due to owing me favors and half unspoken fear of what I might do in retaliation. Nobody really wants to piss off the Witcher Man. The little demon on my left shoulder kind of wanted him to try something just so I could educate him in the finer points of humility, but as the annoying little bastard on my right soldier would no doubt point out, perforating him with 6 or so rounds of silver .357 Magnum would surely cause me some kind of political problems down the line. Also, it would probably be bad karma. Unfortunately, that last part isn't me being sarcastic. In my line of work, when evil can at times be weighed and measured, and the state of your soul weighs a bit on your mind. Damien's face went through a complex series of contortions and spasms as he damn near decided to kill me anyway. Luckily, murder finally lost the battle and he sat back down. Trying to salvage some remnant of dignity, he straightened the collar of his spotless black polo shirt. Between that and his fashionable black jeans, he looked so much the perfect image of a bouncer that I had an uncontrollable urge to give him a fake ID. Finally composing himself, Damien said, "I'm here because there have been 2 murders in our territory. Normally we wouldn't care, but these were obviously humans who were killed by something that wasn't. Our problem is, these killings are a threat to secrecy, and what's worse, all the other local leaders are convinced it was a werewolf that did the killing." I stroked my woefully undeveloped, read non-existent, beard. This seemed like it might get interesting. "And what makes you so sure it wasn't one of your wolves?" I asked. In response, Damien took a folder from his briefcase and laid it on my desk. I opened it to reveal a series of gruesome crime scene photos. The scene showed an alleyway that had probably been disgusting before it was splattered with blood and gore. Judging from the ancient food waste moldering in every corner, I really hoped it wasn't behind any restaurant I'd ever eaten at. The central figure in all the pictures was a corpse of what had probably once been a white male in his 40s. It was torn into several pieces, and while it was just my expert opinion, I'd bet that a lot of the bits that humans generally have were absent. From the marks, which were enormous, I'd also have bet that they were currently making their way through something's digestive tract. However, the really interesting bit was the 4 deep uniform furrows that bisected the upper torso. Damien pointed to the photo that was a close-up of the victim's chest. "Since Wolfgang insists that you're an expert on all creatures, both natural and supernatural, I'm sure I don't have to remind you of a basic fact of biology. Wolves don't have claws." As much as I hate to admit it, the overcompensating bastard had a point. Damien's type of werewolf couldn't have done this, at least not without tools that would be more at home in a butcher shop. Yes, there are different kinds of werewolves, just like there are different kinds of ghosts, demons, and vampires, not to mention the miscellaneous undead. Don't even get me started on zombies, but I digress. While there are technically a smorgasbord of wolf-like monsters out there, most of them are so rare as to be unheard of. Damien's species is what you might call the common werewolf, although not to their faces. They spend most of their time pretty close to human, except they could hit like a delivery truck hauling protein bars and heal as if they had access to Starfleet technology. On the full moon, they turned into especially large wolves, although that is a little misleading. They're really just the size most people think wolves are, rather than the substantially less impressive size most wolves actually are. They tip the scales about even with a really well-fed Great Dane whose owners love him a little too much. The full moon is the only time they can change, and the change is mandatory. They mostly keep their human minds, although I have it on good authority that the wolf mind sees the world a little differently. For one thing, the smell-centric worldview can make things really interesting. Luckily, in human form, they only had human senses. Of course, no matter their form, silver is the Grim Reaper incarnate for werewolves. Not only does it halt their crazy healing, it's toxic. It's not quite as toxic to them as some movies make out, but a silver bullet lodged in their flesh will slowly give them a type of blood poisoning that looks a lot like a human dying of infection as the silver starts corrupting their cells. There are other ways to introduce silver into the werewolf body. I've had to use a few of them, although a werewolf dying of particleized silver injection is not something I'd wish on anyone. "Whatever did this is obviously not a wolf," Damien said haughtily. "I think it's just some other kind of shapeshifter, a bear or a tiger. But we've searched our territory extensively and can't find any sign of it. Wolfgang thinks it might be something stranger, so he wants you to investigate. He's willing to pay your exorbitant rates." The look Damien gave me indicated that he thought I was a waste of money, but he was too loyal to Wolfgang to contradict him out loud. To be fair, my rates are pretty high, at least when I make people pay in cash. In my defense, a lot of times I don't make people pay at all, so the jackasses I don't like have to pick up the slack. The wolves would be paying in cash because they had plenty, and besides, they already owed me a couple of big favors. Their money came from the tithe pack members had to pay to the Alpha. The favors they owed me came from a couple of years ago when their pack had gotten into a tiny altercation with a local vampire and sort of cleaved his head in two with a piece of scrap iron. This rendered the admittedly foolish vampire into an odd-smelling pile of dust and almost started a war. With the vampires howling for blood, both puns intended, Wolfgang asked for help. With a judicious application of bribery and calling in favors, and my knowledge of archaic vampire customs, I was able to make peace. The transgressing werewolf got off light, although having to make a generous blood donation to the vampires, since werewolf blood seems to be a little like vampire meth. All right, you talked me into it, I said jauntily, popping up like a jack-in-the-box and grabbing the keys to my Mini. But I'm driving. No offense, but wolves drive either like old ladies or NASCAR drivers on crack, so I'll follow you. Damien stared at me for just a second before shaking his head in resignation. Fine, he said. I'll text you the address on the way. He turned and was almost out the door when I shouted, "You know you really shouldn't text and drive." He stopped, almost visibly, had a small brain aneurysm, then proceeded out of the office without turning. Feeling quite pleased with myself, I whipped around my office, gathering everything I might need to bring along. Most of it was already in my messenger bag, which I grabbed. It contained all the bits and bobs I needed to do magic, as well as a few gizmos and concoction I had prepared so they'd be ready to play rock and roll. All right, guys, that's where we're going to pause for right now. As I said, this is my urban fantasy magical detective story along the lines of Iron Druid, Dresden Files, all that great kind of stories. And I do love all those stories, but, you know, they always depict werewolves in a certain way and vampires in a certain way. They always talk about the alpha werewolf mentality. And, you know, I always thought that was kind of ridiculous, especially if these were supposed to be humans, because, you know, only asshole humans act that way, and wolves don't act that way at all. So I kind of wanted a chance to call that out and talk about that. So there's going to be a lot of discussion of werewolf social dynamics in this. And I really love quick-talking, smart-aleck main characters, especially the ones that talk a little too much smack and tend to get themselves in trouble, which, as we get to know Daniel a little more, we'll find out that that's just like him. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. We'll be on my next walk. I'll read a little bit more, and we'll just kind of proceed with this story as we go. I hope you guys are enjoying this. If you are, please give us a like. Please give us a subscribe. That really helps us out. And let us know in the comments what you think. Even if it's just good job, terrible job, comments really help us out. Helps YouTube algorithm find us. And I will see you guys on my next walk.